Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 17th of February, and joining me on this edition, our assistant editor Steve Withers.
That's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your six.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
East, west, just point to the compass, each as stupid as the other.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
A successful criminal brain is always superior. It has to be.
Welcome back to the podcast. No special guests this week, but I think our special guest last week went down really well with forum members and listeners. Lots of questions there, which we will follow up eventually with Chris in the future. And stay tuned, because hopefully we'll have at least one special guest every month on the podcast going forward. And who knows who the next one will be. We'll figure it out. Steve's the producer, so he'll figure it out and he'll let us know as we move forward. Competitions. Currently, we have The Boys from Brazil on Blu-ray is open to active members. Closes the 22nd of February, and coming soon, at least when this podcast goes live, there will be chances to win Blazing Saddles and Bullet on Blu-ray. And Mark, previous competition winners were?
9 of them, and they all won a copy of Rocky on Blu-ray, the remastered version. And from left to right, we have SAFCR Top Dogs, a Sunderland supporter, no doubt. Alan D. Alandals, Bertha, Raiden Mark, Mags 15, Paula Reddings, or Readings, Russ Beer, Goatface 21, and which I like that name, I don't know why, and Lim 1957 UK, all won. 9 winners, amazing.
Good stuff. Right, so let's move on. So not a week goes by that we don't talk about Ultra HD Blu-ray, and of course we're waiting with bated breath for the first big TVs of the year, and of course the players to arrive. The first 2 players will be the Samsung and the Panasonic. In America though, there have been some problems already, and Mark, you've been keeping an eye on the forums and other websites across the interwebs, looking at feedback from people who have gone out and splashed some money on the Samsung player, and some of them have been lucky enough to pick up some UHD Blu-rays as well to play on them. Not all a bed of roses.
Not all a bed of roses, and reading certainly some of the feedback as I won't be volunteering for the review sample, let's put it that way. It's the Samsung KD K8500. I think it's the same name in this country, isn't it? Yeah, there have been an awful lot of issues, even for experienced users. And I went through and I noted, I ran out of A4. I had one side of A4 and I thought I'll never fill that, but I've easily filled it. So starting from the top, we've had no HDR available on any of the apps just yet. That's waiting for a software update. YouTube app is cutting in and out. Voodoo app errors. There's a few not powered up at all, so they've had to go back as dead on arrival. There's Amazon Netflix lip sync issues, and that's just dealing with the streaming content. Now, moving on, when they've tried to play some discs, there've been a lot of HDCP 2.2 issues with AVRs and projectors. Seems to be okay if you're going straight into a TV, but there's obviously some problems on the implementation on one side or the other, or both, when it comes to HDCP 2.2. There's complete confusion about settings, which color space to use, whether people should be using deep color or not. Just a whole catalogue of errors. Some Blu-rays are throwing up not playing errors, probably down to BD Live or Java. Forced chroma upsampling with certain setups. People are reporting washed out colors. Some banding on the Martian, which is obviously one of the first discs that's available in the opening 5 minutes. Lots of people reporting heavy banding on the 4K version. Yeah, it's just a general lot of confusion, and this is amongst experienced users, and it all got summed up nicely by one forum poster on AVForums, actually, as it happened. And he put in reply to someone's question, should I pick this player up? He said, look at it this way. Many of the people on this thread forum are highly knowledgeable about AV setup and customization. Look at how we're all asking, should deep color be on, and other questions. We are all literally stumbling around in the dark, not sure how to implement UHD HDR. That's kind of frightening. Dust really needs to settle on this new format. Not to mention handshake issues with 2.0A, 2.2 specs. Give it 6 months and everything will be solid. But for now, if you're not a pioneering, highly technical user, I would say absolutely do not buy this player. And looking at the feedback in general, that's probably the fair assessment of the state of play.
Funny this, Steve, because this was the one question that we raised with the BDA when we were at CES, and we were given assurances that
bulletproof.
It would be bulletproof. Just put the disc in and things would play nice and easy.
I did actually scan through some of the threads, some of the same ones you were looking at, Mark, just out of curiosity this morning. And yeah, There's a couple of people were reporting that they were basically getting this wouldn't play, basically said, not compatible with the TV. So I guess that's one of the things they said might happen. But getting washed out images is not supposed to happen. How much of it is down to the format and how much of it is down to the player, I'm not entirely sure. You could say that things like HDMI handshaking and HDCP 2.2 may not just be down to the player. That could well be the AVR is not behaving properly or the display is not behaving properly. HDMI and HDCP alike, when you're trying to get things to communicate, sometimes it can be a nightmare. But the question, and you mentioned it, Mark, and I've seen various people commenting on it, if there's settings in the player that are buggering things up, that's unfortunate. And the one that seems to be a big issue is deep color.
Yeah.
It definitely need to turn that off, because it was introducing banding. And I mean, a guy took pictures of different settings and showed them for that. You've seen The Martian, where he's standing on the surface and you can see the sky in the background, and there is very noticeable banding in some shots and it's not so noticeable in others. It shouldn't be there at all, though, should it? I mean, you're thinking about it, thinking, well, this is 10-bit, the Blu-ray looks great in comparison. One of the possibilities is whether, because the Martian was shot on natively on 4K cameras, but the effects were finished at 2K. And I'm pretty sure they won't have been redoing the effects again for the Blu-ray release, so for the 4K Blu-ray release. So maybe it's down to that. Maybe there's some issues there. Not sure. But it's not the best launch I've ever seen. First of all, players just seem to sort of appear out of nowhere. I mean, without a set date.
They landed early, didn't they?
Yeah, they landed early. Retailers just started flogging them. The discs aren't actually supposed to come out until the 1st of March. And Amazon appeared to be at least sticking to that street date. But obviously, Best Buy and Fry's and other people in the States have been selling the discs as well, which kind of makes sense, because if you've got to play the watch on it, it's a bit annoying. But it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a shambles.
For a start, it sounds like people have got things switched on that shouldn't be switched on. For a start, I mean, why is there deep colour in there? I guess it has to be backwards compatible, but I'm not aware of any software that has deep colour encoding, so don't need that switched on at all. And you're going to get teething issues with any new product that comes out in any new format. And it all depends what these guys are trying to put the player into as well, display-wise. So, it has to be HDCP 2.2. Are some of them using HD Furies to try and get around that? That could be adding more complexity, more issues to the system. It shouldn't, but it could be.
There's also settings on display side, aren't there? You sometimes have to enable UHD. You have to enable UHD color and HDCP 2.2 on certain TVs I've seen. So. Yep. Yeah, it's very confusing.
It's not ideal, is it, when you've got settings on the TVs you need to be aware of, you've got settings on the players that you need to be aware of, and then before we even move on to things like how the hell do you calibrate for this. But I was under the impression, I'm sure you would agree with this, Phil, that the way they were talking, they've been planning this for years, they've been testing it thoroughly, it's bulletproof. The player will to communicate to the TV, it will map it to the television's capabilities. That does not appear to be happening.
Supposed to happen for HDR10, but that wasn't announced till CES, Steve. So it could be that side of it, which was Technicolor side, which they've now given up, put out to the fact that HDR10 will be able to map to the TV's capabilities. But that was only announced at CES, so that won't be in TVs that are existing on the market as they stand, and certainly in the players as well. And I mean, this is only an HDR10 machine as well.
And this is Fox content, and they're only using HDR10. But interesting, the only studio that I'm aware of that isn't using Dolby Vision. So maybe that's a reason why the other studios have chosen.
Well, using the Dolby Vision layer, there will be HDR10.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, isn't it, with this, that as you say, it's a very confused release point. It's going to kind of come down to how quickly things can be corrected, and if they can be corrected in the field. And I guess also at the moment we've got a sample group of one manufacturer. If it transpires that when the next player, whoever it may be, comes out and it's free of issues, then it's just Samsung, in a desperate bid to be first, have released a piece of equipment that isn't ready. If it then turns out that another product has exactly the same issues, then we have to ask more searching questions about the format.
I mean, in fairness to Samsung, in all fairness to them, Blu-ray was out of the gates too early because of HD DVD, and it wasn't a finished complete article yet. But I mean, this is supposed to be a complete article. That's a very different situation, I think, to the early days of Blu-ray. The whole point of Ultra HD Blu-ray was they've had a long time to get this right. They've been doing it for at least the last 5 years.
And another thing was that the BDA, they were basically saying, look, there will be no issues with this.
Mm-hmm.
People should not be getting washed out images. People should be getting the performance that the TV is capable of, and that seems to be falling down. It could be falling down because none of that is in place at the moment. We don't know because we haven't seen the Samsung player. We haven't had a chance to test it and look at it, look what each settings does and so on. We're having to take the information second, sometimes third hand from internet posts and all the rest of it. So there could be some confusion, there could be some misinformation in there. People could be misreading what's written on forums as well. So until we get one in our hands ourselves, we're not really. I don't think it's fair on Samsung to condemn them in any way, shape, or form. There could be a multitude of reasons why things are as they are being reported at the moment. So until we get one in, until we get a larger sample group, like you say, Ed, it's kind of impossible to say exactly what is going wrong. It could be a multitude of things. And the fact is that unless you have the latest and greatest 4K UHD TV or display, I guess people are going to run into issues with HDCP and all the rest, because we haven't had any real devices to kind of test it out so far, other than a couple of streaming boxes.
No,
I think it's like you say, it's more indicative of the state of the format than the hardware per se. We can't be sure that the hardware is at fault, or the software rather as well is at fault. But it's just the state of the format, and in the early stages, there are going to be problems.
Exactly, there always are teething problems with any new format that comes along. I mean, just look back at stuff that we've seen in the past, not necessarily video formats, but other formats that have come out that have had the odd bugs and so on. And I guess in the internet age, one of the real benefits here, because they are wireless and so on, is that firmware updates are pretty quick to come along. Once they're available, they're pretty quick to update the players, and I'm sure that Samsung are working on this. I'm sure that they're reading the same comments that we're reading at the minute, and it's been a small sample of players that were sold out pretty quickly. As soon as they became available, they were almost sold out. So it could be interesting just to see, were they supposed to come to market when they did? Were they sold ahead of time? Did they all have the same firmware added at the same time? There could be quite a few issues there, so it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out. And of course, we're due to see this player now. Is it end of March? And you're going to go and see Samsung beginning of March, aren't you, Steve? So we should be able to get up to date and get up to speed with what's happening, and get some comment from Samsung round about then as well. So let's move on a little bit, because when the player becomes available in the UK, it's also going to have a copy of them. I'm loath to say free copy, because we don't know what the price of the machine is yet, and some of the prices that we've seen popping up for France, for example, €499 seems a bit toppy, seems a bit expensive. I mean, I had all my eggs in one basket, and I was predicting that this was going to be about 300 to 350 quid, this player.
Yeah, that was my guess, and that was based partly upon indications from sources that between 300 and 400 euros was the price range, and 350 quid sounded about right. 499, let's say 450 quid. That's putting it not far away, I think. I mean, I don't know exact pricing on the Panasonic either, but it's getting a lot closer to that model. And you'd want to see a cheaper model and a more expensive model available for the first two players.
I don't know. Hang on a second. If we're dealing with small production batches for the first ones, and we've got a group of early adopters who, it's wrong to say they'll pay anything, but they will pay to get this long-waited format. If you might as well grab a bit of margin while you can. I know that's awfully cynical and a thoroughly unpleasant thing to say, but if we look at the state of every other part of the AV industry, which is sort of hacked to death on this, you might have one brief and glorious moment where you actually make some damn money. And then I'm sure that prices will be completely and utterly cut to ribbons by Christmas.
Well, there is that, but you also have members of the public looking at this, trying to figure out what this new format is, and then when they see the prices, Ed, it's going to be, that's not for me, and they never look at it again. So
I'm afraid I haven't changed my view that this is a 21st century Laserdisc. It is only going to be a specialist interest format. There'll be large swathes of the public looking at it and going, do you know what? On demand is absolutely fine for my requirements. I'm not a power user of these things. I'm good.
Yeah,
you knock yourself out with this format.
Don't get me wrong. I wasn't talking about the general public, as in the great unwashed. I wasn't talking about that. I'm talking about those that are on the sidelines, that are maybe not quite the hardcore enthusiast, but would maybe pick it up if it was reasonably priced. They're going to look at it, they're going to think, well out of my range, because I need a new TV as well, and I need HDR, and they're going to look at it, and especially if they're high prices, and I think a lot of people's going to say, no thanks.
No, quite possibly. As I say, we'll see how it goes. I don't necessarily condemn manufacturers if they're going to be a bit optimistic to kick off with, but we'll see how quickly things correct themselves in the face of competition.
And of course,
sorry, I've got hiccups.
Well, you should lay off the booze in the afternoon,
No, I'm not going to defend myself. I'm in a good place.
Anyway, that's UHD Blu-ray. Not getting off to the best of starts, but then I guess we kind of knew that this was gonna be the case. Certainly, there's going to be some teething problems when things get up and running, and be interesting how it plays out in the next few weeks. And like I say, we got quite a few things happening. Steve's off with TP, Vision, and Philips this week to see their lineup.
Yes, that's correct. I don't know what the lineup's going to be yet, but they'll be showing their full TV lineup. And they also said that they were going to explain the reasoning behind not including 3D on the 8601. So that'll be interesting. Hopefully, we'll see a new flagship TV announced that will actually come out this year.
Yeah, good stuff. Hopefully, now that Android seems to be settled, we'll get to see the TVs nice and early this year, because I have been really impressed. And the old flagship TV, which we're sadly not going to get to see now, but I'm sure it'll morph into the 2016 set. Really impressed with the backlight on that. We were showing some real torture material almost a year ago now. In fact, it was over a year ago now that we saw the first, had a first look at that TV, and it was really promising back then. So hopefully we'll get to see that this year. So that's we'll get a full roundup during the week with Steve's articles and a video, as well as a catch up next week on the podcast as well. Find out exactly what Steve was showing. Which fantastic country are you heading to? Tropical beaches and that kind of thing?
Brussels.
All right, okay, fair enough.
Good beer.
Yeah, that's chips.
Chips, yeah. Chip capital of Europe.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The Belgians consume more chips per head than any other country in Europe, and they do make some good chips
And good mayonnaise.
Yeah, I don't get the chips and mayonnaise business. I'm sorry, that's just wrong. But they they do a good chip.
So it'll be moule and frite for me.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with that.
And of course, end of the month we got the Panasonic convention. So some interesting things to look at there as well at the end of the month. So, and like we say, Samsung probably beginning of March as well. So we should be getting up to speed pretty quickly with what is coming up this year. I mean, the only one manufacturer that has announced, and we discussed it last week on the podcast, was Sony. So going to be interesting to see the rest of the lineups, especially Panasonic, which is always a strong lineup. Samsung, always a strong lineup. But I guess the main thing I think the forum members want to know, and it's sometimes we get told at these conventions, sometimes we don't, is the price points that these TVs are going to come in. I mean, Samsung came in extremely expensive last year with their flagship LED TVs.
It did drop quite precipitously later in the year. It
did, yeah, but they still came in with some hefty price tags there, so going to be interesting to see that. And of course, no word yet from LG, so we'll keep our ear to the ground, and hopefully we will hear something from LG soon, because they're supposed to launch, I think the first TV's March, wasn't it? So end of March, beginning of April, so hopefully we'll find out a bit more about that. So moving things on, and moving to an area that I've always been interested in, but at the same time never done anything about, because it's always come across to me as being a bit of a faff and sitting around for hours, and that's putting your own NAS drive together, Mark, and putting all your Blu-ray discs and so on onto a number of drives, and using some kind of software to sort them all out and play them back through some kind of media player or a media PC and so on. Always appeals, sounds really interesting, but then at the same time you think, I really can't be bothered. It seems like there's a lot of things I need to learn here.
I had that attitude going into this review, funnily enough. Bit of a new world for me, slightly, but I've had network storage, but only on a very simple thing attached to my router before. This was it's specifically an Asustor AS6102T. And I must say, very snappy title. I must say, setup was very easy. Very, very simple. So you slot your storage in. I got supplied with a couple of 3.5-inch SATA drives, 4 terabyte each. Screw those into the enclosures, clip it in. It's just hot swap arrangement. Attach the NAS to your router, and then get the installation CD out and follow the instructions. And you can be done, even if you read everything, you could be done in 20 minutes. If you just skip through and follow their recommendations, you're done in 10 minutes, and then you've got a network drive sat there waiting for content to be put onto it. I mean, I don't have a massive Blu-ray collection. I had something like 60 here. I've since bought another 20 to make my collection look a bit more up to date. And I bought a Blu-ray writer from Amazon for 60 quid, Samsung Blu-ray writer. That came with a copy of Power DVD, which does everything I need it to do. I just ripped the movie. You can do what you want. You can rip the whole ISO if you want to keep the chapters and menus and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not interested in that. I want to get straight to the content. It takes about, well, for your average movie, I'd say it would take half an hour maximum to rip it, lost without any reduction in quality. You can rip it straight to the NAS. Or you can rip it to your computer and send it to your NAS very quickly. Transfer speeds are amazing on a gigabit network. You can do a 25 gig file in 25 seconds. It's as quick as that, but you can just rip straight to the NAS. I've used Kodi to organize the media, so you just point Kodi in the direction of the NAS drive in the file manager, tell it its movies in there, and then it scans the the movie database, TMDB, and brings down all the fan art, covers, descriptions, all the extra info you get with that. And then you use whatever media player you've got, or your PC, or your you can use Plex if the Plex is a good solution if you're using, say, a console or something that doesn't have Kodi available for it. And it just makes it really pretty interfaces, instant playback, very fast to seek. You can run off my network, which it's okay. It's not. I've not spent tons of time getting my network up to speed, but I had 6 1080p files running at the same time on various devices, on TVs, players, and tablets, and it didn't break sweat. This thing, so it's a very, very flexible item. This one is actually sold as an all-in-one solution, so it's got an HDMI out and a Toslink digital audio out, so you can use it straight into your TV.
Right. Okay. So you don't need a separate media player or
not with
PC
this one. No, it's an
anything.
all-in-one, so you can, if you want, just plug it into your TV and run it direct from the drives installed. You can get it. There's a version of Kodi for it. There's a version of Plex for it, available as an app. So you can just install that should you wish and take it from there. Although in this particular case, it wasn't such a great media player. Well, not for 4K files anyway, which is what I test a lot of, I guess. But for 1080p, 5.1, no problem at all. It was. Yeah, I've actually really quite enjoyed doing this review, and it's converted me to being even more of a streaming convert. Just being able to do it, at original quality, instantaneously with very pretty interfaces is very appealing.
Something that would pique your interest, Steve?
I do like the convenience, but I like the ritual of putting on a disc. It's a bit like playing a piece of vinyl, I suppose.
No, it's not. Not in any way, shape, or form. Opening a little plastic tray is not the same as putting a record on.
When you said ritualistic, do you light candles and stuff and pray?
Yes, and get naked and in that room. It's lovely. No, I don't know. I mean, yes, I totally understand. I appreciate the convenience, and I do like the slick interfaces. And obviously, you could rip your disc and then pop it away somewhere out of the way, and you don't have to have loads of discs on show and taking up bookcases or wherever you keep them.
When you've got kids, that is a big plus.
So I do. I mean, there is a lot of reasons to do it. I suppose, it's just investing the time and ripping them in the first place.
You see, that's the thing. I'm looking at my movie collection and I'm thinking 30 minutes a disc, and I'm looking at that. That's all my holidays for the year.
Yeah, it's a commitment when you've got a massive disconnection.
I'm only being slightly facetious here. Wait until university holidays. Stick a little wanted ad in Hall's residence. Won't cost you very much money to have someone, and I don't mean just a grunt doing it half-assed. Someone you'd be able to find someone that knows what they're doing and do it properly for you, and they wouldn't cost the end of an enormous amount.
You offer it.
So basically, exploits the students of the UK.
Well,
exploit is the wrong word, but if you're giving them the option to do something which is fundamentally simple. Yeah,
but Ed, I live like 6 miles from Durham University. The money involved there, I would have to pay them quite a bit.
I don't know. You see how it is. There's always someone there who's absolutely broke through their own piss poor decisions.
They'll get their partners to do it for you.
Right. So, for a complete novice, Mark, you're saying that this is fairly painless to set up, and a product like that, the review will be
complete novice. You'd have to define that. Some computer literacy would be favourable, should we say? It's nothing complicated, but if you don't know your way around Windows, you're going to struggle to set it up.
Mark, have you tested what audio formats it's happy with?
I didn't. I just stuck to video, Ed. I don't have a collection of audio files. I could know. Going back to this novice, I mean, you don't. Sorry, you can use it on a Mac as well, Steve. You don't
Oh,
have to
good.
You can set it up by an app. It's really not. You can use an Android app or an iOS app as well. So.
It sounds really interesting. I know a lot of people on the forums have gone down that route, but I also know there's just as many people on the forums who it appeals to. I mean, you just have to look at systems like Kaleidoscape and so on, and how neat they look, and then when you look at something like what you're looking at there, Mark, with Kodi and so on, you can set something up that looks just as good, has all the information there, and plays back. I guess on the audio side, it does play back the HD audio files, so you will get true HD and DTS master audio.
You will, not through. This one goes up to 5.1 for HD audio. It's all dependent on your media player. If you use it as a back end rather than the front end, it's all dependent on that player. But I can get 7.1 HD audio streamed from it, no problem. Atmos as well. You can do this. There are players.
It's in part of the Dolby True HD soundtrack, isn't it? So it should be quite easy. It's interesting that things that used to be hellishly expensive elements of custom install, like Kaleidoscape and Control 4 and Crestron, and all these other things, have been largely usurped by advances in technology, haven't they?
Yeah,
I've had word that there is a Chinese Kaleidoscope coming. And I've forgotten who it was. They told me to shut up about it, so I will. I can't remember which manufacturer it was, but one of them has got a Kaleidoscope type device coming.
One question that does occur to me, I mean, obviously this one that you're reviewing, they've supplied it with 2 4 terabyte drives. Is that being run in? Are they being run in parallel? Are they being run in RAID, or have you got 8 terabytes?
Through the setup, you can do either. In the setup process, it asks you whether you want to maximize storage, i.e. RAID 0, or if you want to mirror the content, RAID 1. So I went RAID 1. I've got 4 terabytes of storage is more than enough for me. But you can do it either way.
RAID is not a backup.
No.
Everyone needs this. This needs to be written in stone. It keeps your content available. But if something corrupts on one drive, it will then just pass that corruption through to the other one.
Don't I know it?
Well, you can. There speaks the voice of experience.
Yeah, stop using RAID a long time, and obviously for video editing, keeping files available and all the rest of it. Stop using it a long time ago because it just kept failing, and of course you just lose. Unless you've backed up regularly, and who does? You back up now and again, but you don't do it on a regular basis. A lot of cases I'd lose files, and I've had to restart a few disks because of that. So.
I mean, I just about adhere to a once a month. Let's say I have 3 NAS drives. There's a main Synology, a backup Western Digital, then a fairly ancient Buffalo, which is, if you like, a position of terminal recovery. That very rarely gets turned on. And that none of them are RAID. They are 3 completely separate, completely isolated backup drives.
Where do you back up to? The other RAID? The other NAS?
Yeah. I just once a month. I just essentially, mirror uncopied data across.
I enjoy the visions of the backup on backup on backup, resulting at the end of all these backups with a file cabinet, files in there and a notebook.
Well, I've lost when the laptop I'm using now. When my son managed to essentially drop it enough times that the drive in that died, I lost just enough useful stuff to remind myself that I hadn't been quite as rigorous as I needed to be in getting stuff backed up. But if you've just got RAID selected, just for the love of God, that isn't necessarily going to help you at all, as Phil has testified. So be careful. You'd be better off, if you want the simplest backup, just buying the largest external drive you can.
That's what I do, Ed.
110, 115 quid, and just keep it powered off. You're only connecting to it to back up to. Otherwise, then safely disconnect it from the mains, and keep it somewhere cool and dry.
That's exactly what I do, Ed. I started doing that when I started using Mark's editing software, because it saved it in a library within Mark, and it was just a case of copying that library over an external, and that's what I've been doing, and it keeps everything in order, keeps it all safe, and like you say, power it down when you finish transferring across, and just power it up when you need the next batch moving across. And I've probably filled about 3 or 4 5 terabyte, 4 terabyte, 5 terabyte discs now, just with the footage that we use for the videos on AVForums, and that's it's not a hell of a lot of videos, but it's a hell of a lot of storage required.
And for really critical stuff, and I don't know, legend has it that some member of this parish is getting married in the not too distant future. For things like your
Who's
wedding
getting married?
photos, which
Sorry.
are kind of important, stuff like that, that's worth investing in a spot of cloud storage for. So it doesn't matter what the hell happens. Things of sentimental importance are retained elsewhere.
Yeah,
that's quite handy.
So when are you getting married, Mark?
I thought you getting
were
married, Steve. I missed.
Yes.
Really?
How the hell have I missed that? Congratulations. When are you getting married?
Supposed to be next week.
Just next week then. Fine.
No, it's not.
Is that
next
why
week.
you're off next week? You're getting married?
Yeah, that's why I'm off next week.
Oh, well done. Well, congratulations.
As we were saying, the most desperate gambit to avoid the Bristol trip
Yeah.
in
I've
history.
gone to extreme lengths to get out and go to Bristol this year.
Wow.
But yeah, as I say, cloud storage, that pricing on that is becoming ever more competitive. So yeah, if you've got things that are truly, truly, truly important, stick a copy up into space. But when I say truly important, also stuff that doesn't necessarily matter if there was some sort of huge data compromise. A photo of you wearing a nice suit rather than all of your bank
In
details.
my birthday suit.
If you choose to put those up, that's. As many celebrities will testify, you're doing so at your own risk.
There is one blackmail file which exists on a couple of my hard drives.
Did that not get lost when you lost all that data?
No,
Well backed up.
that one's well backed up.
Oh God! As long as it's not, I don't think it's.
We've all got a copy, Steve, don't we?
It will get used one of these days.
Teach me to go method. Definitely.
I felt sorry for the blow up sheep.
I felt sorry for my mate who had to film it.
He's the real loser here.
It was very uncomfortable.
It might be our wedding gift to him, I think, maybe. Get it framed.
Upscale to 4K. But within that rambling conversation, there's some good advice on there, Strides. Somewhere. And Mark made a very, very valid point earlier very early on in this. If you aren't feeling very confident about getting into network storage, buy a self-contained NAS drive to start with, and then if you're comfortable with that, you can then turn that into your backup and move into Bay NAS drives. They've got a lot easier to set up than they ever were. But if you're in doubt, buy something off the shelf and deal with it that way around. Yeah. But there's a lot to be said for Bay NAS drives. It gives you a lot more customization, a lot more options.
Okay, so that's Mark's review of the NAS drive. It will be up this week. What was the manufacturer again on that?
Asus Store, who are presumably part of Asus.
Okay, there you go. So that review will be up later this week when this podcast goes out. And coming next is movie reviews. So, moving on to movie reviews. What's at the cinema, Steve?
Well, this weekend, just past, we had 3 films opening. Zoolander 2, which actually had previewed the previous weekend, which is why we talked about it on the last podcast, so I won't mention that again. We also had Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which is obviously a mashup of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen and Zombies. And to quote Sharuna's review, too much Pride and Prejudice and not enough zombies for her money. Fair enough. And the other film that opened up this weekend, and the one that I did go and see, it actually opened on Wednesday, in fact, is Deadpool, which absolutely loved. Fantastic. And interestingly, has shattered all records for an R-rated film in the States. It had a massive opening weekend there, the biggest February weekend ever for any film. And in fact, the biggest opening weekend for any film from 20th Century Fox. It actually had a bigger opening weekend than Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. It's been a gigantic success, which just goes to show there is a market out there for more adult entertainment. And you haven't got to make things just for, 12-year-old boys or whatever to try and hit the largest demographic possible. You can have a success with something a bit more adult. Although, granted, Deadpool was on a budget of about 50 million, so it was a relatively low-budget film.
It's already coined it then. Yeah, it's already broken even then.
They already greenlit a sequel before the film had even opened, so obviously they were very happy with the results. But it is a really good film. It's very, very funny. It's very meta, the character in the comics, the character of Deadpool is a character who knows he's in a comic and constantly comments on that. So he's breaking the fourth wall, if you like, within the context of a comic. And that's exactly what they do in the context of the film. So Ryan Reynolds, who is absolutely perfect as Deadpool, is constantly talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall and making jokes about Ryan Reynolds, jokes about the previous appearance of Deadpool, which was a disaster in X-Men Wolverine Origins. He throws in loads of pop references and jokes about all kinds of stuff. And there's a bit where he's being dragged along by Colossus as one of the X-Men to meet. He's like, I'm taking you to see Professor Xavier. And he goes, which one, McAvoy or Stewart? Because obviously two actors have played the same part. It's just full of really, there's so many jokes in it that I think I have to watch it a second time. I want to catch all the jokes again. But it's funny, it's well cast, it's great. There's lots of really good action in it. Really, really violent, which is always fun. Tons of swearing, lots of sex. It's a great fun movie. Laura loved it. She really enjoyed it. I think anyone, it's obviously it's a 15 certificate in this country, an R in the States. But whether you're a male or female, it was actually launched over the weekend, with Valentine's Day in mind. And you really could go and see this as a date. I think it's a good date movie. It's fun. There's a romance in there. Some really good characters. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Kaz gave it 8 out of 10. That's about right. 8, maybe even 9. I'd say it was probably the most enjoyable comic book movie I've seen in a long time.
Films opening this Friday, 999. Now, this terminology is not going to work in this country because 999 obviously in this country is 999, which is the emergency services. In the States, 999, if it's a 999 call over the radio, it means emergency services personnel have been killed or wounded.
Yes. I did wonder when I first saw the title, was it set in this country? And then I realized, it was set in America. I saw the trailer for this before. I didn't know anything about this film at all until I saw the trailer before Deadpool. I thought it looked really good. Had a great cast: Woody Harrelson, Kate Winslet, Aaron Paul.
Yeah, I think the trailer kind of gives it away because obviously it's a diversionary tactic. And that's what for a robbery, and it looks interesting. Like you say, there's an interesting cast there, and it looks quite violent as well, which looks quite promising. Made by
John Hillcoat, who directed Lawless, which I quite enjoyed. So I think I'll probably go and see this actually this weekend if I get time. I think that might be my film of the week. The other film opening this week is The Finest Hours, which is a 3D movie about a true story about a rescue, a ship rescue, a lifeboat rescuing some crew off of a tanker, I think, that actually literally splits in half. And it's shot in 3D. And I read a review of it at the weekend, actually, funny enough, where they said it kind of plays like it's set in the 50s and it plays like a 50s film. So it's very that kind of rose-tinted view of the 50s, and it perhaps could have done with being a bit more realistic. But I guess if you like 3D, it might be fun.
So moving on to Blu-rays, which is my favourite subject these days. Crimson Peak, DTSX. Now, is it DTSX in this country?
Yes, I believe so. I believe this is the first DTSX official release in this country. Okay. Although I haven't got a disc yet. It doesn't come out. It comes out today, actually. It comes out today. But I haven't seen the disc physically to check that. So if someone wants to let me know, that'd be great.
Right, so that's the first DTSX Blu-ray coming to the UK. Then we've got the Program and Hotel Transylvania. Hotel Transylvania 2 reviews up on the homepage. It'll still be there by the time the podcast comes out. The Program. Yeah,
the Program is the true story of the Irish journalist who, for years, was convinced that Lance Armstrong was cheating, and eventually he was proved right. And I've seen the trailer for it. Ben Foster, who plays Lance Armstrong, absolutely, really unnervingly looks just like, really intense performance, looks like him, really nails that. Because Lance Armstrong never looked like a nice person, if you want my opinion. He had that kind of really cold, dead eye look to him, and he really nailed it.
No, you had that big steroid inside of you, wouldn't you?
Yeah. But he absolutely nails it, Ben Foster's performance. Really scary. And Chris O'Dowd plays the Irish journalist who investigates him.
Okay, and I guess the big release next week, next Monday, is a little spy movie.
Yes, a little spy movie which did okay. I think it made about 800 million worldwide, so not too bad, not too shabby. SPECTRE, which, if you haven't seen it, if you've seen SPECTRE, go and watch the honest trailer on Screen Junkies, because they absolutely nail the film. They really do. I quite enjoyed it, but it's got some issues, and particularly tonal issues, because it tries to marry a more campy approach of Roger Moore with the more harder edge tone of the Daniel Craig movies. I'm not sure that marriage always works. Has anyone but me seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I'll go and watch it on Blu-ray, and I'm sure it'll become one of my demo review discs that I keep.
I'm sure it'll look great on Blu-ray.
Yeah, because I use Skyfall quite a bit for demo material. A beautifully shot film. Second half, not so much. I don't like the colour palette of the second half. They went too much for a misty Scotland look and too muted on.
To disguise the fact they weren't in Scotland.
Yeah, well, they were for a couple of shots. Glen Everett and Glencoe, but then the rest of it was shot in Ireland. But the first half of that film is beautifully shot. I mean, the Shanghai fight, we're against the neon lights and they're in shadow. Stunning cinematography, really, really nicely shot. So I use that quite a bit. So I guess it moves on to something that we were talking about a few weeks ago and having a laugh at as well. Our favourite review discs. I think we've gone through this quite a bit. We tend to use the same clips and stuff over and over again. I think it's really important that you have reference material that you're familiar with. Some of us are lucky enough to have sat down with a colorist for certain films and gone through certain scenes with them, and they've pointed things out for us to look for and that. So examples of that, well, one real example of that was Mike Soa recently when I visited Technicolor and Panasonic Hollywood Labs, and he actually sat down and went through a few scenes and what the scene should look like, how much shadow detail should be on show, what colours he was looking for. It has a cyan tint to some scenes, and scene with Morgan Freeman, you should only be able to see certain things. So that's really useful. But again, you get used to seeing things on reference monitors and then having your reference point to what that should look like when it comes to certainly video. And then we have our audio clips as well, stuff that we're used to, heard so many times. Good example, the T-Rex bursting out of the paddock in Jurassic Park. I mean, my first ever listen to that was through a REL Storm on Laserdisc, just in ProLogic, and then obviously the DTS disc came out, which on Laserdisc, which became a favourite. And then I think all the way through DVD and Blu-ray, I've still used that clip. Another one's King Kong for me, Peter Jackson's King Kong, chapter 48. The meet in the street, first of all. So the character Anne, played by, I forget her name now.
Naomi Watts. I
knew you would know it. So Naomi Watts meets up with a CGI ape, and lots of detail there.
I'm glad you clarified that, Phil, not a real ape.
So there should be lots of detail in the fur, in the hair, in that scene, and then her face should be yellow. There should be a yellow cast. It's an old 40s look to camera, playing off her blonde hair and her skin tone, and there should be a yellow cast. And then it moves down to the street where there's lots of shadow detail, but you should be able to pick out the bricks on the wall of the houses and the cars parked in the street. You should be able to pick out details there. And then the walk into Central Park, and there's lights hanging, and they're all primary colours. So you should be able to see what the primary colours look like from these lights that are hanging from the trees. And then obviously there's the snow. It shouldn't be too blue. In fact, it should have a bit of a cyan look to it, actually. And then all hell breaks loose after they dance on the ice and so on. So it's a really good scene to use to get colour tone, to look at your shadow details, and then for motion when things start to kick off. And there's
audio too, isn't there? Because you've got the deep...
Yeah.
His breath, really, there's a deep breath of the ape with a bit of bass underneath it, and obviously it's quite quiet, gentle, and suddenly dynamic range when there's explosions and stuff going on.
You've got Howard's theme as well, Central Park theme behind it as well, which is a fantastic score. That's one of my favourite clips that I use at Dawn of the Planet of the Apes again. So Caesar right at the start when they're in the trees and the thunderstorm and everything surrounding you, again audio wise, but also visually. There's moss on the trees, there's green on the trunks and stuff. I've seen some DLP projectors where that's luminous green, because green's really difficult on a DLP to get right. So I use that quite a bit when I'm testing DLP projectors to see how natural the colour looks. So I mean, those are some of my favourite discs. Sunshine, the beginning of Sunshine, as the craft moves towards the sun, and as it blocks the sun out, you get a lot of shadow detail of the antennas and all that kind of thing of the spaceship. You should be able to pick all that out. It should be a really nice black to it as well, a nice fluid looking deep black, but you should be able to pick out lots of shadow details in there. So those are some of my favourites. Steve?
I used to like using the opening of Terminator 2, where you've got the voiceover of Sarah Connor, and then it slowly builds, and then you've got that bit where the foot crushes the skull, and it's a nice big thud, and then obviously lots of explosions and things zooming around. That was quite a favourite of mine. I also used to use the opening credits of Batman Forever, because back then, this was a few years ago now, but the credits would zoom out of the screen effectively and then to the rear speaker. So you had some quite nice directional effects on those opening credits, and some nice blacks and sort of lots of different layers of black and lots of gradation in it, which I used to quite like using. Well, I do use regularly. A lot of ones I use now have been ones that you put me onto, Phil, like Sunshine and King Kong. For 3D, I love using the scene in Avatar where the seeds of the sacred tree are floating in the air.
Yeah.
Lots of negative parallax in that one, so that's a really good test for displays 3D capabilities. And for the same reasons, the Marvin the Martian scene from Gravity, where he floats out of the shattered space shuttle into negative parallax, and that's actually quite a good test as well. Gravity is one of my favorite discs for generally testing displays contrast performance, because you've got the blacks of space, but obviously you want the stars in there too. Plus you've got the white reflections of the white spacesuits. That can be a real once she's tumbling in space, it can be a real torture test for any local dimming system. So that's quite a good one to use. Atmos wise, Mad Max Fury Road is just a sonic assault for an hour and a half, 2 hours basically. I've recently you watched it recently, didn't you, Everest? But I thought the picture, some of the images of the mountains particularly will be gorgeously detailed. Looks
CGI
fantastic
stuff, yeah. Quite impressive how they put all that together. We got, because obviously there's no way that they're going to fly a drone or a helicopter at those heights, because it's impossible. The air is just far too thin.
Yeah,
but
as they proved with that helicopter sequence when they're trying to rescue that guy.
But the way that the camera sweeps over the mountain and you get the sense of, well, it's what's called basically an establishing shot, because that's what it does, is it establishes where you are on the mountain and how high it is and what's surrounding you and all the rest of it. And the thing that really impressed me was the top of the mountain, and we're not giving you any spoilers that people actually made it to the top, but the shots that are at the top, obviously they didn't film it there, but when you look at that and you look at photographs that they used as the reference point, because it's all done in the computer on blue screen, and it's so realistically done that you would think that they were actually there filming with the other mountains in the background and so on, because they're where they should be and so on. Really, really well put together.
Yeah, I've got to say, regardless, I still agree with Ed's wife on that. It's a fairly bleak film, but it's a very well made film, and I think there's the stuff where they actually do shoot on mountains. And the stuff that's shot on green screen, but it looks incredibly realistic.
Yeah,
cold,
none
really
of that,
real.
Yeah, none of that CG,
raw.
None of the CG breath being added in and that kind of thing.
Fantastic job on that film, I thought. But what made me realise was that when I saw it at the cinema, bloody projector was out of focus, because I didn't get any of that impact until I saw it at home, and then I thought, bloody hell, that looks good. That was not the impression I got at the cinema, which just goes to show sometimes if they get something wrong at the cinema, it can ruin your experience of a film completely. Yeah,
some of the skin pores and close-ups, some of the injuries and stuff, really impressive.
So and there's some quite good when the storm hits, particularly. There's a lot of surround effects and some overhead action, and it's very enveloping, so that's quite good.
When I watched, you were going on and on about the soundtrack, and I said that was all right, but actually really realistic. If you know anything about musical instruments and you're used to hearing instruments in a certain environment or whatever, like drums or violins or trumpets or so on, Whiplash, from the terms of getting the instruments to sound correct in the environment and just the actual level of what it would actually sound like if you were sat next to someone playing like that, or even just getting the hit of a drum. That can be a really difficult thing to sound right, especially in days of compressed audio and all that kind of thing. Obviously, you're listening on a Blu-ray disc with DTS. It sounds phenomenal, really well recorded, really well put together.
Yeah, Whiplash has become something I mean, as you know, I don't do video testing, so pictures are far less in terms of test materials. It's less important for me. So Whiplash has become something I routinely use alongside. I still use Unstoppable a great deal because it's a very, very unusual soundtrack in so much as it's consistently running at 3 different layers, which can be quite hard for speakers to pick apart. And it's also got a lot of, as well as there being explosions and there's plenty of good real world relatable sounds to it, which again it's a very, very useful judge for just seeing what loudspeakers are actually up to at any one time.
Yeah, there used to be a couple of musical numbers that I used to use quite a bit when testing audio back in the day. I haven't used them very recently because I don't have one of them on disc. It used to be on Laserdisc, which was Beauty and the Beast. and it was the opening musical number. I can hear it in my head now. I can't remember what it's called, but that was a really well put together musical number where instruments, a lot of stereo effect, a lot of panning and stuff that would go on during the number. But it was her voice. It was a female voice, which is always a test for speakers when you're testing speakers out, especially towards reference level. You're listening for sibilance and being able to get the voice across without adding anything in there. That's going to distort. The other one was the Elephant Medley from Moulin Rouge. Used to use that quite a bit because it's quite a complex recording. It sounds rubbish on the CD, but on it does. It just doesn't sound right at all on the CD recording. But on the Blu-ray and certainly on the DVD mix, it's really quite a complex arrangement that's going on there, but it comes across really well. So I used to use that quite a bit. Romeo and Juliet, again another Baz Luhrmann, but there was the cover of the Prince song sung by the choir, and then the bass line comes in on that. Serious test of subwoofer, but also I get a subwoofer integration into the system, so you shouldn't just hear the subwoofer, you know what I mean? It should be a really full-on bass line that comes in there when Doves Cry. It's the cover of that sung by the choir, and then when the bass comes in, it's phenomenal. In fact, I'm going to go and have a listen to these now. I haven't heard them in quite a while.
I've obviously subconsciously stolen all yours, Steve, because I used pretty much the same ones. I didn't realise. I must have just read your reviews and bought those discs and thought that was a good idea. But I also use quite extensively the discs THX, ISF, and Spears and Munsell, various clips on those that I've seen on reference monitors calibrated to reference levels. There's just certain things about the skin tones, and there's a couple of really good ones on there. There's the opening montage on this first Spears and Munsell disc is brilliant.
Yeah, I've watched that thousands.
Watch that. If you've ever altered a 10-point white balance controls, that's the one to go for, because it will show up any problems with banding immediately. So I always use that. I've got a real frame of reference on that. I've used Whiplash now. I use Gravity a lot for the same reasons you do, Steve. I've also the Lego Movie. I think it looks phenomenal. It's difficult to have a frame of reference, but it just looks really good. So it's always nice to watch that one. Yeah, I think we share a lot of the same clips, and I kind of rely on the reference discs rather than movie clips as much, because I have a better frame of reference on those.
Back when we were using DVD rather than Blu-ray, I've never tried it on Blu-ray, so I don't know. As a torture test for loudspeakers, the first car park race in Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift is just such a mess. With the soundtrack is too loud, some of the effects are far too loud, dialogue has clearly been ranked about 11th or 12th on the list of priorities on the screen. It's an absolute train wreck of a piece of editing, and it used to be a very interesting test of receivers and amplifiers. If they could make sense of that and make it cohesive, intelligible, and not awful, they were doing really, really well.
And one thing I'm drawing out of this is that the quite a few of these clips, quite a few of these films, we've had on quite a few formats, Steve. I'm highlighting us because we tend to be the ones that seem to have triple or quadruple dipped on some of these. So like I say, I mean, Jurassic Park had 2 Laserdisc versions of that. I'm sure I had it on DVD. Yeah, definitely had it on DVD and on Blu-ray as well. So that is one that I've bought numerous times. There's some that I've bought numerous times and never watched.
That's quite an achievement. I'm quite pleased to say at the moment, actually, I have nothing pending in either vinyl or Blu-ray. There's 2 downloads that were sent to me by a website that I've yet to have a listen to. So otherwise, I think I'm doing pretty well there. I've got very little in my not bothered with category.
I've already mentioned the disc, or the film rather, that I've owned on the most formats, which is Terminator 2, which I've owned on, let me think, VHS, and then Laserdisc, the box set, which was lovely. Also had it on DVHS, had it on DVD twice. I've had it on Blu-ray, I think, I had it on DVD 3 or 4 times, and a couple times on Blu-ray. So I've had that one quite a lot over the years.
I've had that one quite a lot as well. Maybe not as much as you. I didn't have it on digital VHS or VHS, but the rest of them, yes. And about 2 or 3 times as well.
Yeah. I have owned, I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I bought on Laserdisc the Lawrence Kasdan, Kevin Costner movie Wyatt Earp. Never watched it. Then I bought it on DVD. Never watched that either. Then I bought it on HD DVD. Finally got round to think, I think I'll watch that now. Started watching it, and at the layer change, it buggered up, and I couldn't watch the second half of the film. So then I had to go and buy the Blu-ray to find out what happened in the end.
Could you not have gone back to your DVD and watched it? Or is that just an unreasonable request?
That's long gone.
Yeah, but I mean, I've got a to watch pile, and recently I went through that and I binned quite a few of them. Not actually binned them, I actually just thought, right, I'm not going to get around to watching that for a while and put it on the... So there's quite a few on the shelf that are still in cellophane that have never been opened. Stuff like Source Code, I've never watched that. There's other things like The Bank Job, and there's stuff that I picked up for £2 or £3 when I've seen them in sales or bargain bins and stuff, and never gotten around to watching them. I've got a couple of copies of Leon, so there's like the director's cut and the original cut. Never gotten around to watching them yet. I mean, I've seen the film umpteen times, but never got around to watching those discs. Try to think what else there is. Dances with Wolves, I've got about 2 different versions sitting there because you can never get the subtitles right on them for a scope screen.
I've got the Blu-ray release of that, which I bought with you in Fry's in January 2011. I haven't watched it yet. I've got loads of CDs I've never listened to because I'm one of these people that keeps buying. If I like a particular band or artist, I will buy everything they've ever done, but often don't actually get around to listening to most of it.
Yeah,
it's like 3 songs I actually like. Just bought the Greatest Hits album, really.
Yeah, before Tidal, I was like that. There would be certain groups where I'd buy the CDs and sometimes never get around to listening. I've got to say, now that I've got Tidal, I don't buy stuff because I use the offline quite a bit now. So I'll actually offline quite a few things that I want, playlists or albums, onto my phone, and then I just Bluetooth it in the car. And it sounds fantastic. It sounds really good through the B&O system in the car. So I've actually stopped buying music altogether now.
Whereas I haven't. I've still got some issues there. As I say, I own a couple too many copies of Peter Gabriel's third album.
One of my favourite CDs that I still use now to test audio in, and it was not particularly good in terms of the songs. I don't think the songs are very strong, and that's Annie Lennox's Diva.
It's a good album.
So we must be going back to what, early 90s on that one?
Yeah, 92.
It's such a well recorded album. I mean, totally full range, really well recorded, and get that on a good system. It's stunning how much detail you can pull out of it. Still use that now for testing various systems. So Ed, if it's just music for you, what are your top 4 go-to?
Well, the format plays a role in this because it's a combination of what I want to listen to, but then also strength in a particular category. If we're talking vinyl, I will make a beeline for the Minimum Maximum live box set by Kraftwerk. It's just an extraordinary pressing, and it's got monstrous dynamic range. It's just a really top quality balls out pressing. So it'll show you pretty much what any part of the chain is doing. Digital, I mean, I do own it on vinyl, but as a pressing, it's all right. Nothing more, nothing less, really. I make a continuous beeline for a track called Burnout by the Cinematic Orchestra on the Everyday album. It's on Spotify, it's on Tidal, you can have a listen. I must have listened to that without exaggeration a couple of thousand times. We used to use it back when I was still working for Mordaunt Short and Cambridge Audio. It featured in pretty much every single piece of test material that we ever used. Right at the start, it's got a struck bass, and you just get this resonance off the soundboard after they've struck it, which is, it's just such a striking sound, and you just become totally familiar with how you feel that should sound in a reference setting, and you can just apply it to so many other things. And I think whether we consciously work that out or not, for anyone that does any sort of listening on a sort of semi-serious level, there will be a track, and ironically for so many people it's not always tracks that they like very much, that they can just it takes 30 seconds of it, and you've got an almost total handle on what that system is doing. My wife, for her sins, is a Norah Jones track, Feeling the Same Way, which she must have listened to God knows how many times, because of she had to get a number of pupils ready. It was an exam piece some years ago, and if I want her opinion on a piece of equipment which is in, I just need to play that, and she'll tell me pretty much straight off what situation is as far as she's concerned. So that's the case. And then obviously the thorny issue of high res that actually makes a difference. I'm the first to admit that the difference between high resolution and CD is more often than not that the high resolution has been recorded with some degree of sort of skill to it, but the remastering and redoing of Floyd's Division Bell, the Keep Talking, on the CD it always just sounded a little bit strained, not quite together. When they redid it, they sorted out all the issues, and that's a fairly impressive piece of material for sort of high res testing as well.
There's still one event that sticks vividly in my mind, and Steve was with me when this happened, and it was Galaxy Studios we went to visit. So Wilfred Van Balen, who invented Oro 3D, we'd gone along to hear this, but there was a couple of events going on in the studio while we were there during the day, so he'd given up a lot of his time to show us around the studio and show us different things, because there was a press launch on the same day. But they were also recording the soundtrack to an opera that a guy had written. It was either an opera or a play. I think it was a play about World War I, if I remember right, Steve.
That's right.
So you had a full orchestra there in the studio, and the studio is about the size of Studio One at Abbey Road, so kind of the same type of room with the same type of reflections and so on, and full orchestra. And what we did was they were going to do 4 or 5 takes of this one bit of the score. So they were going to do it 4 or 5 times. For the first 2 times, we stood in the studio with the orchestra and listened to them going through this one bit of music. And it wasn't very long. It was about 30 seconds, 40-second blast. So we listened to that twice, and then going into the control room right next door, and it was a full Genelec system, studio system in there, and obviously they're recording live into the desk, and you could hear back what was being played in the other room. And we're talking about some of the most natural speakers possible being amplified properly through a mixing desk that it was being recorded to, and it sounded nothing like it did in the big room. There was just no way that you could pick up the sheer dynamics and the way that the air was moving in that room. You just didn't get that coming through the speaker system.
I've only ever heard one pair of loudspeakers do an orchestra correctly, and regrettably they were £250,000.
And you can and you can understand why, because it's actually capturing that and being able to play that back. And there's just no way you can move that amount of air that the orchestra was moving in that room. And I'm completely accurate with this. I'm a Steve. I mean, you were there. You stood next to me, and it just didn't sound anything like it sounded in the room, in the control room.
I mean, it makes you appreciate, because we obviously listen to a lot of recorded music through various systems. When you're actually standing in front of a full orchestra, you understand what that really sounds like. And I don't think, it would be almost impossible to... It's amazing that they can capture as much of that as they can, using various technologies. Yeah. But the actual experience of being there live with the real orchestra was sent shivers down your spine, didn't it? And tingles
and of course it's stuff that they can't capture, which is the air moving in the room. It's the way that the orchestra is interacting with the room. They only pick up certain bits of that in the recording, and you can try all you like with DSP and those type of effects that various manufacturers use on their products to try and capture that, and so you can't do it. You just can't do it, and that's when you appreciate how difficult it is and how good speakers are. Certain brands of speakers are when you listen back to them and when you test them, because when you've got that reference point of what it actually should sound like compared to what the reproduction's trying to be, I mean, you can understand why people spend silly amounts of money on stuff, and I think it's a bit of a fallacy really, because when an orchestra's concerned, I don't think you can capture that performance.
As I say, I've heard one thing come quite close, but that's it. I mean, equally, if you want something just as a tonal test, which uses some of the same rules but on a much smaller scale, the American singer Regina Spektor, nothing to do with Phil. There is a song that she does called Consequence of Sounds, and it's her and a piano, and that's it. And the piano isn't doing anything particularly dynamic, but it's just a tonal test. There's nowhere for a piece of equipment to hide. It just has to get these two. It either gets these two things right, or it sounds like a bag of spanners. So it's a very interesting one. Not least because it's not desperately volume dependent. It's either going to sound right or it's not. It's always quite an interesting one to use. And again, that's on Spotify and Tidal if you want to have a play.
Anyway, I think we've outstayed our welcome again for another week. So those are just a handful of the stuff that I listen to. I mean, if I was to sit here and go through everything, I think it'd be 3 hours long. There's so many clips and bits of music that we all go to, but I believe that those are our favourites, and maybe it gives you some ideas to go and test on your equipment, or maybe you've got some ideas of what we should be using as test clips and stuff that you look at and stuff that you're really familiar with. What is it that you use if you buy a new bit of kit, whether that be video or audio or even both? Tell us what you think in the feedback forum under this forum in the podcast. And all I need to do now is thank Steve Withers.
Flattery will get you nowhere, but don't stop trying.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Tell me. Oh, no. Sorry, I'm spoken for a while.
Whoa,
Wake up.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
And Ed Selley.
Careful, the whole place is probably wired for sound.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video. And of course, you can leave us a rating on iTunes as long as it's 5 stars. And we'll read your name out in the next podcast, because it's the end of the month, the next podcast, isn't it? So yes, 22nd is the last podcast of the month, because the following week we are not around. We're not here. We're taking our mid-term break because we're off to the Panasonic convention at the end of the month. So yeah, get your 5-star ratings in. We'll read them out. And until then, thank you very much for listening. I'm Phil Hinton, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.